Here is where the last video left off. The profile card has become an edit form, and that form carries hx post, pointing at a root on the server. So let's use it. Clear the name field, press save, and the browser stops you. It points at the empty field and asks you to fill it in. Nothing was sent. That is the browser's own validation, doing what it does on any HTML form, and htmx4 stays out of its way, which is correct. It is also not the whole story, because that message did not come from HTMX. The field is marked required, so the browser refuses to fire the submit event at all, and HTMX never hears about it. Now change how the request is triggered. Drive it from a button that is not a submit button, and there is no submit event to stop. So HTMX checks the form itself and holds the request back. Same message, same request not sent, two different mechanisms underneath. Which matters? Because they are switched off by different things. Here is where people get caught. You do not want the browser's default bubble, so you put novalidate on the form, planning to draw your own. In plain HTML, that stops the browser checking. In htmx4, it does more, because htmx reads novalidate too and stops checking as well. Press save with that field still empty, and the empty value goes to the server. hx-validate set to false does the same. One more thing, if you came from htmx2, there, you had to switch reporting on yourself with a config setting that was off unless you asked. In 4, it is the default. So if you are carrying a workaround from 2 that calls report validity by hand, delete it. That is one small thing going wrong inside something larger. So let's put the whole shape on screen. Between pressing save and seeing a result, the browser validates the form, sends the values, receives the response, swaps that content into the page, and lets the new content settle. Everything left in this video attaches to one of those phases, and this track stays visible so you know which one we are on. Everything here is htmx4, and today that matters more than usual. So, what the request carries? Look at the markup and notice that nothing in it lists the fields, and nothing needs to. A form sends the fields the browser counts as submittable, the ones with a name that are not disabled, and for a checkbox or a radio button that are actually selected. Each field's name becomes the parameter name, exactly as an ordinary form submission always has. So hx post on this form sends the name and the role without being told to. If you need values from elsewhere on the page, hx include takes a selector and adds them. The browser can check that a field is filled in and that an address looks like an address, but not whether that address is already registered or whether this name collides with an existing record. Only the server knows those, and everything the browser checked has to be checked again there, because validation in the browser is a convenience and can always be bypassed. So the server re-renders the form, keeping the values the user typed and placing the message beside the field that failed. Your template already knows how to draw that form because it drew it the first time. Now the status code, where htmx4 differs from the version most tutorials were written against. A common status code for a validation failure is 422, so let's send that with the re-rendered form in the body. Watch what happens. The response comes back, and it goes straight into the page, because by default htmx4 swaps every response except 2, 04, and 304. That sounds convenient until you look at where it landed. The target was the profile card, so the error form has replaced the whole card. The attribute that sorts this out is hx status, which lets you say what should happen for a particular code. Give it 422 and a target, and that response lands in the errors container instead of the main one, while successful responses carry on going where they always went. If the root answers with the whole form rather than just the errors, add a select and pick the part you actually want. You can match an exact code or a whole range, or tell a code not to swap at all. The rule underneath is the one worth keeping. In htmx4, an error response is content. So, decide where it goes before your users discover it for you. While the request is in flight, on a fast connection, nobody notices. But on a slow one, the interface says nothing for a couple of seconds. htmx marks that state rather than drawing anything. When a request starts, it puts the class htmx_request onto the element that made it and takes it off again when the request finishes. The partner class htmx_indicator marks the element you want revealed, and htmx ships a small default style sheet so that element stays hidden until a request is running. Your own CSS replaces that whenever you want. Two attributes refine it. hx_indicator takes a selector, and the request class goes onto that element instead of the one that made the request. So a spinner elsewhere on the page can answer for this button. And hx-disable adds the disabled attribute to whatever you name, for as long as the request lasts. So save cannot be pressed again while it is working. If you are coming from htmx2, note that this attribute changed name in 4, and that the name it took used to mean something else entirely. Disabling save handles another click on save. It does not handle every request raise because a form can contain several elements that make requests of their own. Picture the email field validating itself as the user leaves it, while the user is already pressing save. Two requests from two different elements now overlap, and a late validation response can overwrite what the submission just put on the page. hx-sync is the attribute for that. It takes a selector naming what to synchronize against and a strategy. Drop is the one you get without asking, and abort, replace, and queue are the others. On the form, set hx-sync to this, replace. Submitting then aborts the validation request that was still running. All of that happens inside this one browser tab, and a second write can reach your server without passing through it. The user refreshes and submits again. A second tab is open on the same page, or the application retries after a response it never received. So let's say this precisely. hx-sync coordinates the requests this page knows about, and it does not make the write safe to repeat. That part belongs to the server as a unique constraint or a key sent with the request, so that a repeat can be recognized and ignored. The rule to keep is that a mutation is not a single event. It is a sequence: validate, send, receive, swap, settle. And every surprise here was one phase of it behaving in a way nobody mentioned. Learn which phase an attribute attaches to, and they stop being surprises. One thing is still open though. Everything we sent came back and changed a single place on the page. Yet, saving a profile should also update the list it appears in and the count above it. One response, several parts of the page. That is the next video. If you like seeing how the web actually works, subscribe. That's what Code Seeker does.